Mayor, he's the GIS, MS4 coordinator for the city of Mankato, and he'll be giving a presentation today.
Thanks. Good afternoon. As Mark said, I am the MS4 coordinator for the city of Mankato. And like I said in the earlier meeting, people ask me what I do. I say whatever requires getting yelled at, arguing with people. That's pretty much dealing with stuff that smells, stinks, things that people want resolved. That's a big part of my job. The MS4, you guys are a member of this elite club that we were all put into against our will. So you know where this comes from. It's not something that the city came up with. It's not something the state came up with. The federal government came up with this program, mandated it onto the states, who mandated it onto the cities that are individual MS4s. Currently, there are 255 of them in the state of Minnesota, the biggest being around the metro. Those are all individual ones right there. I am down here, right at the bend of the Minnesota River, and you guys are right there. That's your MS4. We just had 5 new ones. Every time the Census Bureau comes out and does a new analysis of the population of an area, you become an urbanized area, and they expand that and draw that out. So we got 5 new communities, 2 townships, 2 colleges, 2 counties, and MnDOT, District 7, became MS4s. And because I'm the biggest MS4 in the area, and theirs only expands like a mile past our borders, they contracted with the city of Mankato to have me run their MS4 programs as well. So I now cover that entire area, which is probably 30 square miles. Mankato itself has a population of 52,000. I currently have 297 construction sites that I am responsible for inspecting. I am a department of 1. And the only way that I can do that is by training staff to be my eyes and ears out there. Not to make extra work for them, not to do anything special. All they got to do is, if they see something, say something. They know that if they see something weird, they can call me, and I'll go out and take a look at it. Even if I tell them not to worry about it if it's not important or not. Let me figure that out. And it's been a fantastic way to find problems that I didn't even know existed. So that's where this training that your city asked me to come and do, that's where this is really important. It's just to show you what the purpose of this is, why we do it, and how is an efficient way to do it. Stormwater, just to give you a little background, 1972, Minnesota was delegated by the EPA to administer the National Pollution Discharge Elimination System. That's the permit that runs the MS4 permit, the industrial stormwater permit that your airport and different facilities have to have. It's also the construction stormwater permit. So in order to do construction over an acre, that was all developed back then because of major environmental concerns that were going on in the early 70s, late 60s, and so they created this program and handed it down to the state. 1987, Congress amends Clean Water Act to address stormwater Phase 1 regulations. Now notice what they started with. You got 5 acres or more of land, required a permit, 11 categories of industries, medium and large municipalities with populations over 100,000. So we weren't in that category. And the only construction sites that needed a permit were 5 acres or more, and the MPCA handled them. So cities weren't affected by that. But these permits are in a 5-year cycle. And so when people don't comply with them, the next 5 years they tighten the reins and they come up with new regulations and they force more stuff on us. So what I always recommend to people, we have to follow this stuff. It's federal law. We can't vote it out. Council can't ignore it. Administration can't ignore it, or you will be fined. So we should do what we have to do to stay compliant with it. Otherwise, it's going to be worse the next cycle. And you'll see that where that comes in. 1999, the 5 acres didn't work. The 100,000 population didn't work. So now it's down to every site of an acre or more. That's a huge difference. Every site that disturbs an acre now needs a permit, needs oversight. Smaller municipalities, small MS4s, now that dragged us in, but everybody over 5,000 population or on a special water. So up by Duluth, there's townships that got 12 people per population, but they have to be an MS4 and do all of this stuff that we have to do because they're next to a trout stream. And it's because people ignored it, didn't do the rules, and so NPCA said, okay. EPA came in and said, now we're going to tighten up some more and we're going to require you to do it. And so it makes big differences. And it gets very expensive very fast. 2001, the rule was created that required these permits. 2002, NPCA issued the first small MS4 permit. Now when they say small, that's 5,000 or above. Cities like St. Paul, Rochester, Minneapolis, they have to have their own special permit. They have to sit down and negotiate with the MPCA every year. So they get, whatever they didn't do good the year before gets put into this permit, basically. And so it's a big process for them. We get a general permit. We get the same one as everybody else. My permit requirements are exactly the same as yours. 2003, they issued their first permit. This organization, MCEA, which is a environmental watchdog group, sued the MPCA and said, what you are requiring is not good enough. You're not following the rules. You need to do stricter stuff. These are people from Minnesota that sued the MPCA to make our rules stricter. They won. In 2006, that's when we all started being MS4s. Only the newer ones, so I know you guys started in 2006 as well. And that's when I started with the city of Mankato. I came from the state of Minnesota, being with MnDOT. They were looking for people who already knew stormwater because nobody knew what the heck all this was. I showed up, kind of like Mark did. I got an office, it was empty, had a computer in it, a stack of papers that were about a year behind on being answered. And they said, sort it out. And that's kind of how I got to know this stuff. 2011, the MS4 permit expires. So I belong to an organization that's a division of the League of Minnesota Cities. I'm on the board of the Minnesota City Stormwater Coalition, and what we do is we lobby for cities when MPCA comes out with this new regulation. So when the new permit comes out here in a year, we're going to dissect it and say, no, this is too expensive. We can't do this. You need to make it so we can manage it. We can't spend $1 billion. We don't have $1 billion. That kind of stuff. And because of these battles and us, those of us that are considered knowledgeable in the stormwater law, reading through it, we actually kept them from reissuing the permit for 2 more years, going back and forth until they made it to something that we could stand. And so, like I said, it's actually a pretty good permit compared to what they offered us the first round. And that's why I advocate that we should follow the minimum rules and at least do that, because the next one's going to come out and they're going to force us to do it. And then we have no say, no flexibility. What does MS4 really mean? The long word spelled out, the reason they call it MS4, 4 S's, Municipal Separate Storm Sewer System. And the reason they call it that is because if you ask our grandparents and stuff, they'll just refer to it as sewer. Because back in the early days, the wastewater and the stormwater all went together. But the problem was we had to build bigger and bigger plants to process that water because we had all that I&I going in there, you know, infiltrated water from sump pumps and roof drains and streets and that kind of stuff, and it made it unmanageable. Well, now we're kind of going full circle with all these regulations. It'd almost be cheaper to build a plant if they keep putting this stuff on us to treat the water rather than all these rules that we're having to follow. So now they've separated the two. But what this permit is, in layman's terms, is it is permission for us to take our stormwater that lands on our land and on our streets and our roofs and our parking lots and send it to a body of water that belongs to the U.S. government. So your rivers, your streams, your lakes, we are allowed to discharge this water, which is known to be contaminated, to those bodies of water. But because of they're granting us this permit, as long as we do things to try to keep that water as clean as we can. And that's the whole purpose of this thing. And if you wonder why, Google the trash island. There's an island of floating garbage the size of Texas between California and Japan. And nobody knows what to do with this. And it all goes through our stormwater grates into the rivers and ends up out in the ocean. There is an area that you probably heard of in the Gulf of Mexico, that from the Mississippi River. Nothing grows, nothing lives, and it's miles wide. And it's all from our garbage and our chemicals and our oil and stuff like that. They don't know what to do. It's dead. It's completely dead and nothing will grow, nothing can live, there's no fish. It's just a big area at the bottom. And it all becomes because of this runoff that we don't protect. Municipal. Must be a government entity operating under federal, state law with jurisdiction over the discharge of the stormwater to the lakes, rivers, streams, and wetlands. So again, the municipality of Fergus Falls, you own the streets, the gutters, the parking lots, the pipes, the storm pipes, the outfalls, the ponds, all of that is infrastructure that belongs to Fergus Falls. That is your MS4. And to put it in simple terms, anything that conveys stormwater, so ditches, swales, they all count. This is what the 255 regulated small MS4s are made up of. You have hospitals, townships, colleges, counties, watersheds, correctional facilities, MnDOT. They have their outstate, which is out here, and then metro. That's why they only have 2. And then 174 cities. These are the types of things that we're trying to keep out of the stormwater, that we're required to keep out of the stormwater. You think this one's funny, and it is, but you'll see in my pictures later, I've actually had that happen. These guys, I went and told the guy that he can't blow his grass out in the street, and so what did he do? He gave me the bird, and he took a bag and went out in the street and shook it out into the middle of the street, and threw it out there. But what happens is, and you guys know, the public works guys, it gets on here, it gets all gummed up, it plugs it up, it floods the street, it does that. Plus, this stuff is just like toilet paper. Everything you put on your lawn soaks into it. You cut it off, you send it down the system, and you wonder why the ponds grow algae and the lakes grow algae, and why you've got pesticides soaked into it, all kinds of stuff. Separate storm sewer, we talked about that. It's dividing up sewer from wastewater. System, that's a complex array of stormwater conveyances, we talked about that. And here's some examples of that. Your pipes, catch basins, your ponds, your outfalls, your ditches, rain gardens, those are all part of your MS4. That is your MS4. These are the things we're trying to keep out of there. The things that we can control. Now, if there's a prairie that has some dirt in it and the rain comes down and it washes some of it off, or a bluff, nature's already putting enough of this stuff into the water itself. So we need to control the things that are within our control. Covering topsoil piles so that it doesn't erode into the catch basins. Sweeping up after our trucks haul out into the street. And someone says, oh, it's only this much dirt. Okay, I have 297 job sites in my town, and if it's only this much dirt times 297, now you're talking a dump truck load is going in there every day. So the way they did this is the EPA came up with 6 focus areas that are critical for local programs to be effective in reducing pollutants. And they call them MCMs, or minimum control measures. These are the required things that we have to do as an MS4. We have signed a document with the state of Minnesota, and the EPA has approved it, that says we will do these things if you allow us to discharge this water. We've already agreed to it. We can't say we're not going to do it because we did when we signed it. MCM1, educate the community, sending out flyers, talking to people, doing what I'm doing right now, talking to people, explaining what this is. Involve the community. You have your SWIP that's on the website so someone can look at it and they can call in and say, hey, what's this? Maybe we should do this, in addition to that. Find and eliminate illicit discharges. See something, say something. You go out, you see a culvert shooting out foam into the creek, and you're like, oh, that doesn't belong there. Call your people, have them go track it down, you'll find out that there's a washing machine hooked into a sump pump, down the street, because it was cheaper to do that than to actually have it plumbed. And get rid of it. Oversight of construction sites. We need to go out and make sure that our contractors are doing what they signed on their permits that they would do. They agreed to keep their sites clean when they took out their permit. All we're asking them to do is do what they said they were gonna do. And so we go out there and we make sure that they follow through. Because if we don't, then we get complaints from other citizens that are upset that they got dusty windows and noisy things and stuff going out in their street that they gotta drive through. Ensure construction projects install permanent practices that reduce pollutants long after the project is completed. The rule is, if they have a construction site, they build a building, now if it's over an acre, they have to put in some sort of treatment on site to control their stormwater before it becomes our stormwater. This is a good thing because it helps us. So we want to make sure that they do it. And one of the big tricks that they'll do, and I'm sure you've seen it, Mark, is you get a project and they'll say it's 0.99 acres. Well, it's how much they disturb. Or they're adding, I get a lot of colleges that'll come in and give me a plan set and it's always under an acre, but they've added and added and added and added and added on and on and on. Well, now they've gotten rid of all the grass and it's all parking lot and roof. So we have to watch that and make sure that they're putting treatment on there. That's a little trick that they do. Manage your own stormwater infrastructure. That's MCM 6. That means City of Fergus Falls properties. You have to manage them. That you got your salt piles covered, your topsoil piles covered, that you're checking the area where all these things are at and making sure it's not bleeding off into creeks. There's no drainage to a creek that drains the whole site, something like that. You don't have discharges coming out of this building out into the river that's right behind you. You have to make sure that there's nothing new. If we're requiring the citizens to do it, us as a municipality, we have to set the bar and follow the rules. Here's what's happened so far since this program's in place. These cities decided they weren't going to do it, and now they're paying this. This was $32,000, and it's a stip that if they come into compliance, we'll knock it down to $16,000. They were the first ones in the state. He comes to every one of my trainings. I see him at every single one that I do across the state. Because they're in trouble and they're being watched. These guys, 18,500, they weren't doing any construction site inspections, and they got caught. It's been 10 years. We've signed 2 permits that say we will do it. They weren't doing it, and they got fined. I wouldn't want to stand in front of council and say, because it's my responsibility in the city of Mankato, I wouldn't want to sit in there and say, yeah, I just cost the taxpayers $18,000. So it's an important thing. We cannot vote it out. We cannot not do it. It's a federal mandate. City of Shakopee, that one surprised me. They have lots of staff. They're a newer community. They have a big tax base. It really surprises me that they got caught without it. Detroit Lakes, same thing. It's tough. We don't have the money to do this. It's a state mandated thing. But what I tell people, I'm one person in a city of 52,000 with 297 job sites. I can't do it myself. So, like my dad always taught me, work smarter, not harder. Come up with ways to do it. Train your staff so that they call you when they see something, and you react to the ones that are bad. And then when you get a bad person, especially a local person, and you've played nice with them, you've asked them over and over again, you got to bite the bullet and find them. And then word gets around. I'll go to my job sites, and I'll drive past them in my truck. All the contractors know my trucks. And so they'll call the owners, hey, Rick's out here looking around. I'll drive by, I'll see that there's stuff out in the road, I'll turn around and go talk to them, and the guys are already in the street sweeping up. And it's because I've found a couple key people. I don't beat people up, I don't do it on purpose. I start with verbals, but I'm only going to tell them so many times. After that, they need to step up and do what they said they would do. And once you do that, you get a mutual respect, and they'll play nice. The good ones will do what they're supposed to do, because they're good people. Then you only have to focus on the couple that just won't behave. Another part of the training, it's required that you train your field staff, people that are out driving around that see stuff, anybody that's valuable that can be helpful. Like I said, nobody's asking you to get out of the car and talk to anybody, do anything like that. Get on the phone and call the appropriate staff and let them know. The definition of an illicit discharge means any discharge to a municipal separate storm sewer that is not composed entirely of stormwater, except discharges that have a permit from the MPCA or the EPA. So wastewater has a permit to discharge. Somebody that might be doing dewatering and have a permit, and fire emergency water. Those are okay, they're permitted, they're allowed. Anything else, if it doesn't come out of the sky naturally and go into the storm drain, it's not allowed. Now, you can do your hose water, but I don't know why you'd want to stand with your garden hose and spray it in the storm drain. But it can go down there. Your sump pump water, it can go down there. It's just clean groundwater. But you can't pass that sump pump water through a pile of dirt and then have it washed down into the storm drain. So you can't allow that water discharge to create a nuisance. And that's the difference in this. And this is an interactive thing, so if a question comes to mind, just let me know, and I'll answer it as we go. Even without our ordinances, without our permits, this has always been the rule in the state of Minnesota. And it comes down to one simple fact. The water that comes out of the sky needs to be like it comes out of the sky. It can't smell funny, it can't look funny, it can't be a certain temperature, above a certain temperature, there's standards for that. We were talking about your plant over here that discharges warm water. I told Mark to check with them and see if they should have a permit to discharge that. And there's a standard as to how warm that water could be, and they should be monitoring that. If they are, it's not, you guys don't have to be concerned with it. That's MPCA's issue. So it can't be altered in any way. The stormwater that you discharge into your system, that should be able to look in a bottle and go, I would drink that, even though you won't. But it should look like that. This is my city ordinance based on this illicit discharge, and so what I do is I basically clip and paste the state standard. Never commit to more than the minimum, because you can never go backwards with the anti-backsliding law. So if you put into your SWIP, we were talking about this when we were doing, that we're gonna sweep 16 times a month, and then the budget doesn't allow for that, you can't go and do less than that. So always commit to what you have to commit to, and then do what you need to do above that if you want to do more. But you don't want to commit to it because you can never change your mind. Another part of it is you have to incorporate illicit discharge detection into all inspections and maintenance activities. So when you guys are out looking in the pipes, checking manholes, checking outfalls, you have to be looking for illicit discharge stuff. And I'm going to give you examples of that so you know what you're looking for. And it's simply that. You're doing your regular job. If you notice something hinky, you let people know. Detecting and tracking the source of that illicit discharge. So if you see something weird, you call your staff that you have dedicated to that, and they're going to go track it down. Training of all field staff. That's what we're doing right now, what we did this morning. And I'm basically just giving you the visuals of what you're looking for. And I call it the four-leaf clover effect. If you've ever been out with your kids and you're looking for four-leaf clovers, it takes you like an hour to even find one. As soon as you find one, your eyes are trained to it, and you see them all over the place. And that's the same with this. Once you see this, you're going to be out driving around, and you're going to go, I've never noticed that before. I better call Mark. And you're going to see stuff. Identification of priority areas likely to have illicit discharges. I'll give you a good example of what I was just talking about where you're going to see stuff. I got called to a big chain grocery store because they have this nasty leaking dumpster of just this awful leachate fly infested, maggot infested, stinky stuff. And I go to talk to the guy because he has sawed a line in the parking lot so it'll drain right into the catch basin. And so I go and I talk to him, and he comes up to me and he goes like this and steps over the gross stuff and goes, "Is there a problem? What can I help you with?" Didn't even realize what it was. And I said, "This, right here." And he goes, "Oh yeah." I said, "Why did you saw that slit? You're basically having a legal discharge here, and you've committed a crime." And he's like, "Oh, well, people were stepping in it and carrying it into the building." And I said, "Well, you rent that compactor from somebody, call them up and tell them to fix it. It ain't gonna cost you anything." He just never thought about it. He didn't think of it in that manner. And so he was just trying to solve his problem, but he didn't realize what he was dealing with. That stuff is nasty. It's like 400 to 500 times the legal water quality standard, because it's diapers, and rotten food, battery acid. Procedures for timely response to known, suspected, and reported illicit discharges. So someone reports one, you have to have a procedure in place and to react to it in a timely manner. You can't just put it on a piece of paper and go check it 4 months later. You have to have a specific chain of command. Procedures for investigating, locating, and eliminating those discharges. So once you find it, once you determine where it's at, you have to have a procedure to get rid of it. And I've seen, when I've looked in the paperwork of other cities, they'll have a comment like, "We'll send them a letter, give them 60 days to get rid of it, and if they don't, we'll call the MPCA." You can't do that. That violates your permit. An illicit discharge has to stop immediately, if at all possible. It needs to stop. Whether they bypass it, they do treatment, they plug it, whatever they do, it has to stop as soon as you find it. Then you have to come up with a plan to permanently stop it. But something has to be done that day. Procedures for responding to spills, including emergency response procedures to prevent spills from entering the MS4. So you find a spill, you guys are out driving around, you see some vehicle leaking all over, you blew a hydraulic line, you have to have a procedure, someone to call. If it's bad, it's dangerous, you call 911. If it's something you're sure you know what it is, or it's your vehicle, then you call the appropriate city staff and they'll get someone out with floor dryer or something, but you have to clean it up and you have to properly dispose of it. And obviously if it's hazmat, you call the fire department. Inspections. Annual inspections of all structural stormwater BMPs. That's like your ponds, your outfalls, your sunken manholes, where you got the little 1 foot drop in the bottom to catch sediment, things like that. Those got to be checked annually. Prior to the expiration date of this permit, permittee shall conduct at least one inspection of all of your ponds. So in the 5-year period of this permit, all of your ponds need to be inspected for functionality. The permittee shall conduct quarterly inspections of all stockpiles, storage, and material handling areas. So your city properties where you got your stockpiles, your salt, all that stuff, every quarter has to be inspected. And that includes dumpsters. That's probably one of the things that I had the biggest problem with. Our parks department, and I totally understand why, was using big roll-off dumpsters. Well, that's even against federal and state sanitary laws. You cannot have refuse that rots or will start rotting if it gets wet in an open container that isn't leak-proof. So you can't use roll-offs. They're only for construction materials such as brick, wood, rock, things like that. And so we had to switch all of them to ones with tops on them and plugs in the side. They have to be water or leak-proof. That's something a lot of cities get tagged for on their own property. Maintenance. Based on these inspections that you do, the permittee will determine if repair, replacement, or maintenance measures are necessary. So once you find the problem, you'll determine if you can or will fix it. Necessary maintenance shall be completed as soon as possible to prevent or reduce the discharge of pollutants in stormwater. So you don't want to have an inspection form that says, "I saw this," and then never do anything about it, because you will get in trouble for that. Visual inspections, this is an example. Driving around, and you're doing your normal business, and you see something like that, it's gonna jump out at you, and you're gonna go, something's not right here. Contact the proper staff and let them know. This one here, this happened in Mankato. A guy was working on a crane, and I don't know why, but in this giant parking lot that they had, he decided to park right on top of a catch basin. He's working on the crane, he raises it up, and pulls a main hydraulic line. Dumps 150 gallons of hydraulic fluid into the storm drain in his parking lot. It's Friday at 3 o'clock, and he throws some floor dry down and he goes home. The whole weekend it rains. His boss comes back on Sunday, he calls me, he's almost in tears because he knows he's in trouble. I go out and look at this. If his guy would have called me the day it happened, it was an accident. We had 1.5 miles of pipe that this traveled through before it got to this creek. We could have stopped it, cleaned it up, and it would have been just an accident. No harm, no foul. Stuff happens. But because his guys decided they didn't want to get in trouble, and so they were going to hide from it, it ended up in a creek. 500 feet down from this right here is the Minnesota River. So I'm scrambling in the pouring rain with the fire department. We're putting down booms, trying to keep it out. Luckily, we kept it contained in this. We found a pool a little further down. We were able to put all kinds of absorbents in there and have the hazmat guys come down and help us get it all cleaned up. It was a major job though, walking around in the woods, no roads around, all hilly. It was a big pain in the butt. That cost him a lot of money because he had to reimburse us for all our time. And it was several days. If you're driving around and you see this, don't just assume they washed paint or washed brushes or rinsed the bucket out or concrete tools, because this is what's under the grate. That is a 12-inch round stormwater pipe with about that much available space. The gentleman that rented one of those Just Ask rental do-it-yourself ready-mix trailers, there's a $150 fine for returning it dirty. So he rinsed it out into our catch basin in front of a grade school that was going to be opening in 2 days. He plugged the bottom catch basin of the entire system. That was the bottom of the system that goes out to the main. So if this plugs up, you can see our under drain for all the sump pumps right there. That all would back up into all the houses if we would have left it. So we had to do emergency locates, and as you know, there's never anything easy. There's fiber out there, electrical, water, gas. It was a major pain in the butt. That $150 he saved cost him $22,000 in repair costs. Made the newspaper. It was a big deal. But we got it done and school was able to open on time. This one still baffles me today. That's why I always show it. Guy was unloading a pallet at a grocery store of salt. And you know, they stack a pallet here and a pallet here on the trailer. Guy goes in and forks the one, he pushes the one off the back. So he's got a whole pallet, hundreds of pounds of salt. And in his brilliant mind, there's a hole that's 8 feet deep, I'll just sweep it all in there. This thing is completely full to the top, 8 feet deep, with softener salt. I would have never found this had a guy who went to the store to buy a bunch of bananas, had seen my little video on the public channel at 2 o'clock in the morning, I must have no social life, calls and says, hey, you may want to see this. But I'd have never found it. It was in the parking lot in a corner of a grocery store. But not a good thing. And then, how would you like that coming through your backyard on your nice little crib? Cooling water from a heating and air system. It's just cooling water. Then why is it green? It's got chemicals in it. If it's got anything in it wholly comprised of stormwater, it can't go in there. Training of all field staff. Address the importance, that's why we're talking about this today. Cover the requirements of the permit relevant to the job duties. If you're outside, like I said, all we're asking you to do is, hey, this doesn't look right, call the appropriate staff. That's the end of it. It helps a lot, and you'll see why. Include a schedule to establish the training for new employees and seasonally. That's a requirement. So now that all of you have been trained, when a new group comes in, you have to have something set up, whether it's in orientation, I think that's when we do ours, or we have a regular safety meeting, aware and all that stuff that we have to do regularly. I'll go in and do a little divvy about stormwater. You don't have to make it difficult. You know, once you get it established, you do it when it's convenient for you. Who are considered field staff? The way I define that is whoever you think is going to be beneficial to your city to help you solve this problem. Definitely public works staff. They're always popping manhole covers. They found a million things for me. I mean, I buy them pizza every once in a while because they make my job, you know, so much easier. They help me find stuff, really important stuff. They do a great job. Police officers. I'm a licensed police officer. And those guys, I go and I do training, they tease me all the time, you know, make fun of me when I say illicit discharge and other things like that, like little kids, but they love doing this because they're driving the same routes all the time. It gives them something else to look at. And they just call me on the radio, 3252, yeah, I saw this thing, you guys dumping his pool, you might want to look at it. That's the end of it. That's all they do. And it helps me out big time. Firefighters, they're out doing medicals, stuff like that, driving around, out jogging, you know, whatever they're doing. They've caught a bunch of stuff for me too. I just showed them the pictures of what to look for, and they call me. It's great. They help me clean up a lot of the big stuff too, or they have these different tools that can analyze what things are, pH strips and things like that. So if I find something, I can take a sample of it to them and they can tell me if it's hazardous or not. Bus drivers. You wouldn't believe how handy these guys are. Excuse me. They drive through their neighborhoods picking up people, and you get to memorize what everything's looking like, so if anything changes, they notice it. And they found a bunch of stuff for me. And they got radios in the truck, so they can call me. Building inspectors, they're out there checking construction sites way more than I'll ever be, and so they help a lot by telling me that there's stuff out there. Identify priority areas. Retail business districts. You got bar and restaurants, they have lots of liquids. You know, they don't always dump their bottles out. I talked to them about it to try and get them to do it. But they are renowned for leaky dumpsters. They're fried foods and they're liquids. Grocery stores, they have those big compactors, milk, old fruit, and stuff like that, lots of liquids. You saw the picture earlier. Shopping malls and hotels, they love to throw their bleaches and other cleaning chemicals out the back door. And I've never understood this because they will walk past 4 sinks to do that. But they do it. Hotels the same way. Heavy truck and automobile shops, I've had a real problem with them, but I've went and visited every single one in Mankato now, so I think I got them for a while. Carpet cleaners, big pain in my side. They're always pulling something. You'll see pictures of it later. There's no like association of them or anything that I can get a hold of all of them at once, so basically what I'm doing is finding them. And if you don't think it's a big deal, it's just soapy water. The one I did that made the newspaper, that contaminated a lake, he was dumping in the catch basin in front of his house every night. So every night he'd come back with 600 gallons, he'd dump it in the catch basin and empty his truck. And so he made the paper, and then I fined him for that. Sent that one through the court system, took months. And because it made the paper, I got a call like a year later from Ithaca, New York. And it was the wastewater treatment plant operator, and he's like, yeah, Mr. Barrett, I saw you in the paper, and you had this enforcement that you did, and here's the chemicals that you listed. What was that? Our entire plant is now dead. Somebody dumped carpet cleaning chemicals in Ithaca, New York, a city of 80,000, and completely put their waste treatment plant to a dead stop. And I told him it was carpet cleaning chemicals. And because of that conversation, they started looking down the pipe where they think it came from, and here it was a warehouse that sold carpet cleaning chemicals, and they dumped a bunch of old ones into the system. And they shut down the entire waste treatment plant. It was a big deal. All because of laziness, that they didn't want to spend the money. And the worst part is, the guys that I'm dealing with, they've mixed it with water, and then they're cleaning up the floor. These guys were dumping the straight, concentrated chemicals, very strong, right into the system. Industrial parks, you got all your warehouses and that kind of stuff, dumpsters. You know, there's certain ones, it depends on the business, because if all they have is cardboard, you're not going to have a problem with them. You know, but if they're dealing with, warehousing chemicals and things like that. I have one that, not because they're doing anything wrong, but they have a lot of accidents, they run generators. And so they'll have fuel lines break and stuff. I have a lot of issues with them. Scrap yards, some of those guys with their vehicles, the vehicle should stay there in the scrap yard as well, because they're always leaking and blowing hoses or something. Ready mix plants, I have a lot of. Was having a lot of issues with them. You'll see some pretty nasty stuff that happened in our town. But I finally went to all the owners of all the plants that delivered to the Mankato area, and I had sit-down meetings with them, and I drew the line in the sand, and I said, we're not going to do this anymore. If you continue to do this, this is your final warning. You're going to get fined. You're going to go to MPCA. We're done. And it's been pretty good. Bituminous plants, we'll have problems with them every once in a while. Sand and gravel pits, a lot of tracking, dust, complaints, that kind of stuff. And here's your priority areas. And it just comes down to laziness. Bar closes, guy dumps his fryer grease in there, and it overflows, whoops, it's full. So he goes and gets a container to dump the rest of it, but he just leaves the rest of the stuff. Police officer out walking his dog caught that for me. Caught it just before it went in the storm drain. It was just kind of making its way, and then it'd get cold, and it'd coagulate, and then it'd warm up, and then it'd go a little further. So we were able to get this cleaned up before it happened. The owner of the bar, great guy, would have never had anything to do with this, but it was one of his employees at late at night. These things, big pet peeve of mine. I was in a car wash once. I'm sitting there, and I'm waiting in line, and the guy takes his ashtray out and dumps it right on the parking lot, right in front of me. And so I couldn't resist. I got out and made him clean it up. 200 years it takes for those filters to rot away. 200 years. So every one of those that's been thrown out in the last 200 years is still there. And if you think this isn't a problem, every time you go to a stop sign, look to the left. You're going to see them right like that. That's where that picture's from. Is sitting in my car at a stop sign. People going like that. This one I didn't even know was a problem. Public Works found this one for me. Degrease hoods. I guess the grease hoods at restaurants, they got to pull these filters out and spray degreaser on them. Well, they were going outside in parking lots and doing it. This company would go around to all the restaurants at 3 o'clock in the morning and degreaser, soap, acid, whatever they're using, and then wash it right down the storm drain. My guy's doing flushing for the water department. Out at 3 in the morning, flushing the water hydrants, fire hydrants. Caught him doing that for me. I didn't never know. But I was talking about leachate out of dumpsters. They'll pull the plugs because they don't want to pay for the water weight. They don't have the lid on there. It's real common at the dorms, the apartment complexes for the college kids. They have so much garbage, rather than paying for an extra delivery, they just stack it as tall as they can. So I put the garbage companies on notice that if I see that, I'll hold them responsible for it. And I also gave them an olive branch, and I said, if you have a guy doing this, you let me know, and I will go tell them that they have to get another collection time. I will be the bad guy in that situation, because we don't want this stuff. This stuff is horrible. So here's the compactor I was telling you about. The guy cut a slit right there so it would drain. There's another one there. All he had to do was call and have him fix the gasket. Wouldn't have cost him a dime, just a phone call. Here's the hotels, shopping malls, just dumping their cleaning supplies from the floors. Dumping it right outside. There's a wash bay right inside there. They walk right past it to dump it out in the parking lot. Here's an auto repair place. You can see they empty the fluids. There's no cover on this lid. The way I found this, that's me standing there taking a picture. The way I found this was I was driving by, and it was really weird because the grass that was around this guy's parking lot, all the way around it was completely dead, like someone roundupped it. But the problem was, if you spray, usually that's a consistent straight line. This was like really jagged, and it just looked really funky. So I pulled in there, and here I saw all these chemicals leaking all over and just washing down the parking lot. It was killing all his grass. This guy just baffles me. So, this kid was covered in, if you know the floor drains in your shop where you lift the lids and you scoop that nasty sludge out, well, that's what they were doing. They were putting him in this bucket. This kid's walking out, slopping it all over himself. And he's dumping it in our little drain in our alley. And he's standing out there stomping it in there. And we went and cleaned our line, it was just plugged with this sludge from years of doing this. This stuff was hot. It had metals in it. I mean, it was really, really bad stuff when we tested it. So MPCA got involved. This turned into a really big deal. Here's one of my carpet cleaning guys. That's what they'll do. They'll park up in front of the job and they'll hide it right by the tire so you won't see it just driving by. That's his clean water. Oh, it's just dirty water, but I'm using green product that's safe for the environment. And that's why I always tell them, well, then put it in a glass and drink it, and I'll walk away. Well, I can't do that. Well, then you can't dump it down there, but how clean is that? All of that was going in that guy's catch basin in front of his house every day. Another guy cleaning filters from powdered milk and flour places, and like I said, they're driving it outside on purpose and washing it down a storm drain. The Minnesota River is right down the road. This guy right here, when I showed up, he knew he was in trouble. He must have smoked 3 packs of cigarettes. He was so nervous, just one after another. Till he's calling his boss, trying to get him out there. His boss told me it's a new guy, and he just took that upon himself. And I'm like, no way. No way did he know to drive all the way through the place, outside, park right there where there just happens to be a hose to rinse them off. He was told to do it. Scrap yards, tracking out onto the streets. For timely response to illicit discharges, spills, and leaks, coordinate with 911, the fire department, all those people to set something up. And since 1969, it has been the law that you have to call the Minnesota duty officer if you have a spill of a hazardous material. The only exemption currently on the books is 5 gallons of petroleum product or less. If it's anything else, and what I use, people say, well, how do you know it's hazardous? Does the product have an MSDS sheet? So it'll say it's an eye irritant, it's skin irritant, it burns or something like that, then it's a hazard. So you have to report it to the duty officer. And the responsible party needs to call. Because if they don't, it can end up being a $10,000 a day fine if they don't call and report themselves. And it does not count for us to call for them. Set up a spill response SOP for call-outs. So when you see a spill, it's bad, do you call 911, do you call the fire department, do you call Mark? Just have a plan so you know what to do. That's a requirement. Strategically place spill response equipment. Case in point, a big spill that I had, if you know the Mankato area, we have a bridge called the North Star Bridge. It goes over the Minnesota River. We had a semi driving too fast in the rain on this curve, rolled over and busted open every reservoir on that truck. We had antifreeze oil, all of his diesel. He was full, and it ran down into our storm drain system. And I'm scattering all over the city, trying to find so much as floor dry, and we had nothing. Our fire department had a few things on their truck. We didn't have anything to clean this up. I rushed to Napa and got as much stuff as I could. I cleaned them out to take care of this, but by that time it's traveling. And I'll tell you right now, cleaning it up on top of the road, hundreds of dollars. Cleaning it up in the pipes, thousands of dollars. You get it into a creek or into a river and you have to have the hazmat teams, you're talking hundreds of thousands of dollars, really fast. Conduct post-incident reviews. This is important. If you have something happen with your own staff, with your own vehicles, we had a truck dumping biosolids, and we did these post-incident reviews, and it happened every year and in the same spot. And we figured out it was the same truck every single time. And so we looked at it, and it wasn't latching properly. And so there was our problem. We got the truck fixed, we got rid of the truck, and now we don't have the problem anymore. Set up spill response for call-outs. If a spill occurs, this is on the state law 115D 061. If a spill occurs, follow these. Observe safety precautions. If you don't know what it is, call the fire department. If you're not sure, if it feels like it's hot or it's something, don't go play with it if you don't know what it is. If you know what it is, you can deal with it. If it's just antifreeze and it's one of your own vehicles, you're sure what it is, just clean it up and properly dispose of it. If it is something hazardous, you can walk down 2 blocks, drop a boom to keep it out of the catch basin. You can dig dirt out of the boulevard and throw it down. Keep it out of the catch basin until the guys can get there to clean it up properly. Call 911 if you don't know what it is. Contain the material, that's the biggest thing. Slow it down so that people can deal with it, the proper people. This is what biosolids look like. If you ever have a road that's iced over really, really bad, this stuff is fantastic for clearing the road. Does everybody know what biosolids are? It is the final product of a waste treatment plant. That is human waste that has been processed. It's been chlorinated and all of that stuff, and it comes out and it's all kind of pressed with all the fluid out of it. It looks like soil, but it smells really bad. This is a residential neighborhood. The guy hit the tracks. He didn't brush his tailgate off, and so the little latches didn't go, and he dumped it right down a residential neighborhood. I had no idea what to do. Floor dry's not going to work. It's freezing cold outside. But I had to get it cleaned up. So little did I know when I called my local emergency response guy from MPCA that salt is a natural, basically it's good for sanitizing stuff. You know, the same as your Purell. I never knew that. It's an old-fashioned method of doing that. So I did what we had. I had them sand and salt everything as thick as they could because I needed something to bind to it, because you can't use water with your sweepers, but I needed something that pelicans could pick up. I was totally guessing here. I had no idea if this would work, but I was just trying to think of something to get it resolved. And I figured at the very least I'd cover it up so people aren't tracking it any further. And so we just went down and emptied a whole truckload on it. That's how it turned out. I mean, I got really lucky. I mean, that's the cleanest road we have in town. And I got real lucky. You see, like I said, there was a foot of snow compacted on this road when we started. And this is, 3-4 hours later, it's clean as could be. And I got real lucky because the catch basins were frozen behind a foot of ice there. And so I didn't have any risk of it going down. I built these spill kits. I placed them all over town ever since that one on the bridge so that there's always one nearby somebody that they can use. I put 21 of them out. I have replaced all 21 twice. So that brings the question, what did we do for all the years prior to me doing that to clean up our spills? You can buy these kits pre-loaded. They're like $700 to $900, and you get a bunch of stuff that you don't really need. I bought these. I did 21 of them, and I did them each for $150 each, and I loaded them myself. I have them in 21 locations. Every person in town has one. All of our supervisors and our foremans have one of these in their truck, so they know where they're at and they know what's in them. Because some areas are in our lift stations, so it's water. They're just good for water. Other ones are in place where they're good for other chemicals. It all depends on where they're at in the city. Put maps out there so that they know where they're at, and you can see they're spread all over town in key locations on our properties. They've been very handy. Post-incident report, write down, think about what went wrong with the biosolids, why did it happen. Oh, it's the same truck every time. Maybe we should get that fixed. Use the ERPs, enforcement response procedures required by the permit to eliminate illicit discharges. So you find something, you got to use your policies that you put in place to compel compliance if they won't do it on their own. Here's what mine are. I have my illicit discharge ordinance, which defines what an illicit discharge is and then I have my construction, erosion, and sediment control ordinance. Then I have a nuisance ordinance, which is the enforcement piece for these, ties all these together. Any violation of these two becomes a nuisance according to this one, and it lays out verbal, written, administrative penalty, stop work order, all of that. Came up with admin penalties. I went to court when I first started this job. I'd spend $6,000 in man hours and paperwork and writing reports. And I'd go there, and the judge would be like, well, what do you want me to do? And I'd say, well, it's a misdemeanor, punishable by $0 to $1,000, up to 90 days in jail. Pick one. You'd fine them $75. $50 of that would go to the court. We'd get $25. We spent $6,000. So that was not working. They're just not ready for these to enforce these rules yet. They don't want to hear them unless there's dead fish or something very serious. So I came up with the construction sites that won't clean up after themselves after being worn and worn and worn. We came up with a sweeping fee because we don't want to take our staff off of their job to drive across town to clean up somebody else's mess that they already agreed in a permit they would clean up themselves. They've signed a document saying they do it. They're required to do it by state law. So we charge $350 an hour. If it takes 2 minutes, it costs them $350. So now they all have brooms on the front of their skid loaders. They're doing a good job. It's cured that problem pretty fast. Illicit discharge by administrative penalties. The state of Minnesota gives a civil penalty for an illicit discharge of $1,000. I tried 100, MPCA sent it back and said that's not strict enough. Put it up to 500, and they were okay with that. So if somebody dumps something in and they can't recover it, because if it goes down the pipe, they can suck it out, clean it up, and dispose of it, it's an accident. If it goes in there, it goes into the river, we can't get it back, they're gonna pay the fine for doing that. If it wasn't an accident that they didn't report. The other big piece of this is like the guy with the crane just went home, thought, shh, don't say nothing, nobody will catch me. Again, MPCA charges $1,000, I charge $500 if they do that. So if they don't call and report it, and it goes and we can't clean it up, they get a $1,000 fine. If it happens again in 24 months, it doubles. And we've had really good results from this. Once you do 1 or 2 of these, word gets around. I'm not out there doing 20, 50 of these, I'm doing like 3 a year. And those are the guys that just won't listen. It's been very effective. All right, we're done with all the legalese stuff. Anybody got any questions for this part of it? Now we're just going to show you cool pictures of bad stuff. This right here, when you're driving down the road, you see a pond and you see this little vein of stuff and discoloration going out there. That's sediment. So you look at that and you're like, why is that there? That shouldn't be there. You go down the road a little bit and see a big old 4-inch hose into a manhole. Probably not going to be a good thing when they go look at that. You go up and look at the top. He popped our manhole, has no permission. He's dumping something into our manhole. It was the horizontal drillers. I have so many problems with these guys. If you have them in town, watch them. They're doing stuff. I mean, I'm finding gas lines bored through my storm drains. I'm finding cables through my storm pipes. They're just not doing good jobs, good practices. They sucked out this hole filled up with water after the rain. You can see how murky and muddy that is. And they discharged it right into our system. When I told the guy, I said, he was working for us. And he did this without permission. I said, why did you do this? Did you ask anybody if this was okay? He said, no, I just popped a manhole and dumped it in. I said, what if that had been like an electrical manhole for streetlights or something like that? He had no idea what that was. What if it was a sanitary manhole and you just dumped a bunch of mud in there? Yeah, the guy just didn't care. Before that contractor got out of town on our project, he had been fined $6,000 because he kept doing bonehead things like that. No matter how many times I talked to him, explained face to face what the rules were, he kept pulling stuff. It was just unbelievable. I'm so glad they're out of town. Does anybody know, and not the people who've already seen this, does anybody know what that is a telltale sign? That is paper mache from toilet paper. That is ground up toilet paper. That is a sump pump discharge. That's the sump pump. Now my guys were out, as you can kind of see here, they were out marking because we're doing some construction on this street. And they saw that little kids are riding their toys through this, dogs are walking through this. And so what I expected is it's a common thing that older houses, if they add a washing machine or a shower down in the basement of an old house where the plumbing's up here, a lot of times they'll dump that stuff into the sump pump and you'll get that out. And that's what I fully intended to find here when I went and did the inspection. But I've learned, trust yet verify. Check, because if you don't, you're going to get stuck. And I'll show you the nifty little video from the inspection here. First of all, it's coming into the sump pump, going down into here. That's the dye. Now, I tested the shower downstairs and the laundry machine, and yeah, that came through here. Let me show you this nifty little video. Then I went upstairs in the toilets and had guys dump dyes. I'm talking on the radio to them. And that is exactly what you think it is. That is disgusting. Little kids riding on their little plastic cars and bikes and everything, going through that. That is a serious health hazard. The guy who owned the place was in South Dakota hunting. I called him up, and he said, well, I'll deal with it when I come back. I said, no, you won't, because this house has been condemned. You cannot have a house and have people living in it that doesn't have proper waste facilities. So the house was condemned. He had 3 apartments in there. They all had to be put up in hotels. And so I made him come back that night, and I was not happy with him. And his whole excuse was that he put in this wash machine downstairs, and the pipe couldn't handle it, the old pipes in this in the wintertime, and it burst the pipe. And he didn't want to pay for emergency work, so he just put it in the sump pump, but it plugged his sump pump. Guess what? Because it's not meant to have toilet paper and other yucky stuff going through it. And so he went and got a septic pump to grind it up and then shoot it out onto the sidewalk in front of these houses. The citizens that lived in these houses that were renting this from him were mortified, standing there watching their stuff come out onto the street in front of their house. When I think I've seen everything, then I see something like this and I'm just like, oh wow. Again, I wouldn't have caught this. My staff, you guys, the public works out driving around just doing their regular job, caught this for me. And it's a big deal to get rid of, because this is horrible. You can see we're doing the construction project, but the guys were out marking and they found this for me, and that's fantastic. This one, remember I was talking about the guy in National Lampoon's Vacation? This is our entertainment alley. So you drive through here, all the bars are along there, here's the parking ramp, and over here is the Verizon Wireless Center. And we had a concert there. And a concert tour bus for the band realized that his facilities were full. So he pulled into our alley and dumped the human waste into the alley at 3 o'clock in the morning. So I got a call, we got out there, Public Works and I are out there because I'm on call 24/7, I have a take-home vehicle. We go out and we have to figure out how to clean this up, and the sad part is we got out there and all the people were coming out of the bar and they're sliding, what is this? Laughing and giggling, walking through human waste. And it was not a good day. That stuff was vile. Here again, here's a close-up of those. The two top things that are horrible for water quality and for being poisonous to water is milk and blood. And the reason that is because the bacteria loves it. And so a simple teaspoon of milk dumped into a 10-gallon aquarium will kill everything in it and will not allow it. It makes it anoxic. Because the bacteria, when it goes to consume that stuff, multiplies and multiplies, and the energy that they use takes up the oxygen. That's how a waste treatment plant works. And so this guy's rinsing off milk. 500 feet away is a crypt in the Minnesota River. I was talking about those dumpsters. These are roll-off dumpsters. You can't put liquids in them. They're not sealed. They just leak. Luckily, there was a bunch of leaves around this, and it stopped it, so the guy was able to clean it up. These guys were stuccoing a building, and they dumped their rinse water out right in the parking lot to go down into our storm drain. And basically, it was gone, so I had to find them to get that out of there because there was no way to get it further down the pipe. You couldn't crawl down in a 12-inch pipe. It was gone. This guy, telltale sign, you'll see something like this where it's got a little spot, you see the wheel tracks, little wash water dripping. That is a concrete truck that's rinsing out its chutes into the gutter. If you see something like that, call. That's a big deal. If any of you that have ever done concrete work, if you've had jeans on and you're kneeling down in it, and when you get up, your knees are itchy and they're red. You know, my dad owned ready-mix plants my whole life growing up, and you get done working that stuff and you're just itchy and everything. Well, I learned that's how Tilex was invented. A guy was washing out concrete tools in a sink and shined it all up. That's what it is, basically battery acid. It's alkali. And so that stuff is horrible. You don't want that in the storm drain system. Another telltale sign of that, you'll see the double track. They'll pull right up to these so they can wash their water right into the storm drain system. This is the mining pits that I was talking about. You know, these poor people that live over here. This is a frac sand plant. If you ever get, I'll give you a piece of advice. If you ever get an application for one of these places, do what you can to not let it happen. They are a big, big pain in the butt. The serious fines, constant nuisance calls. It always looks like this in the morning, dust going over, they drive too fast, constant complaints. I find them $10,000, they just keep paying the fine. It's part of doing business. Well, finally, a bike rider that had called me that I fined him for 100 times because they never clean it up, called the EPA. They came down, found out they weren't doing any of their air monitoring or anything, so they got like a $40,000 fine, which got an audit, and we went out there and did stormwater. They weren't doing any of their paperwork on that, so they got another $40,000 fine. And I don't know how they're still operating, but they're bad actors. Here's, you know, a construction site tracking. This is what it looks like. And they don't clean up after themselves. It ends up going right down into the storm drain. These guys, just my pet peeve. I have a daughter that's in softball. She's in basketball, she's in volleyball. I love going to her games, and I do not like missing her games, and especially for things like this, it's just laziness. This guy is in a development area. He's drilling way back in a corner. There's no buildings there. It's not a place I drive. My guy driving the street sweeper went back in there. He was doing some night cleaning of the streets, and he saw this. That is bentonite. If you're not familiar with what that is a lubricant for the drill bits that they use in heavy clays. We're Blue Earth County. We have heavy, heavy clays. And they use that so those pipes won't bind up. If you've ever dealt with this stuff, you put it in a bottle of water, you shake it up, you can set it down, and a week later it'll still be suspended. That's why there's very specific rules for disposing of this. They're supposed to back it up, and they're supposed to land apply it and then till it in so that it consolidates with dirt and can't be washed into the system. To put it in perspective, you put that into fresh water with fish, it is the same as rolling up your windows, lighting up a cigar in the car, and trying to breathe. That's what that does to aquatic life. I had to turn around for my daughter's softball game, come back. This guy, they'd already left for the cities. I made them come all the way back and clean it up. This will wreck a sweeper trying to clean it up. It'll wreck the brushes. You'll have to replace them because it's just sticky, snotty stuff. It's horrible. And he didn't even try. He just popped the cork and went home. This is another guy. Cable company put fiber in on this new street. This guy's drilling laterals to each one of the houses. He's just letting it go. This college kid right here had seen my training and went out and confronted this guy on it. He basically told him things in bad words and told him to go away. So he called me. I went out there, and the guy's like, "What could possibly be wrong with this?" And I said, "Well, it's going into the catch basin with my little fish on there that says absolutely no dumping leads to the river." I said, "That's an illicit discharge, you need to clean all this up." Of course, he didn't have any equipment or anything to do it, so we did it, and we billed him for it. It was very expensive for him. But it basically went past this one, went into another catch basin. It was a big mess. It took hours to clean this stuff up. This is my claim to fame. This was done by the Minnesota Pollution Control Agency. They were drilling test wells for an old electroplating company. And the company that they hired was drilling these test wells and using bentonite and put it out. That's across 3 lanes of traffic right there. When I first drove up on it, I thought it was water. But then I saw a motorcycle go through it. I mean, he just about went down. That's how slippery and hard this was. There was 4 cubic yards of this stuff when we finally got it all cleaned up. But I asked the guy, I said, "You got to get this cleaned up. It's a traffic hazard. It's hazardous material. You got to deal with it." He goes to start up his fire hose and was going to wash it down my storm drain, and that's when I shut him down. And I called the MPCA, and this person coming out with a hard hat that said environmental compliance inspector comes out. "What's the problem here?" And I said, "Well, look." And they said to me, "Well, we're working for the MPCA." And I said, "Well, that's even worse." I said, "I wouldn't have admitted that." So I called MPCA, and like I was telling them this morning, I have a message from 2009 that I still keep on my phone for a giggle every once in a while. The commissioner of the Minnesota Pollution Control Agency calling to thank me for catching this. Because if this would have went to WCCO or something, it would have been pretty embarrassing. I wasn't gonna be that guy, making it in. But this is what they're doing. That's all supposed to be backed up, containerized, and dealt with, not just let go down our storm drain system. Across the road from here, there's a 96-inch pipe that goes down here. You can drive a car through it. The Minnesota River is right back there. There's nothing we could do. It was gone in the river. They were shut down for 6 weeks before the MPCA would let them start up again. My buddies at MnDOT, out cutting, they had a contractor come out and saw cut, no inlet protection, no nothing, dust flying all over. All these people are just furious. So I had to shut that project down until they got it all cleaned up. But they just left it there. People driving through it just poof every time. You're gonna look for the telltale signs of this saw cutting. They cannot do that. This is what the carpet cleaning stuff looks like. It'll smell like an alcohol kind of smell, you know, like isopropyl alcohol, and it'll be all sudsy. Again, the cigarettes and stuff, that's a telltale sign that it's a carpet cleaning guy. How would you like that coming through your creek behind your house? College, a contractor working for the college did not do it, it was the contractor working for them. It's just cooling water. They said, why is it green then? It's got chemicals in it. You need a discharge permit for this. First of all, it should have went down the wastewater, not into the stormwater. And so basically they put all this horrible chemical and made it look like Chicago on St. Patrick's Day. This right here, guy was waxing or de-waxing or whatever they do in the store, taking the wax off and putting new wax on. Police department's right here. So we dumped that at 3 o'clock in the morning. All the officers that checked in when there was shift change called me and had me out there. The guy had already went back up to the cities. I love doing this, I'm sorry, but I made him drive all the way back to Mankato to come clean it up. Because it wasn't, I just put a barrier around it. Because that's how they learn. They come all the way back. They have to stop what they're doing because that's what they made me do and clean this up. Sometimes that's the most effective tool. This guy got a whole bunch of free blocks. They were all muddy. He decided it would be neat to wash them off in the street. His neighbors disagreed. They all called me, having a hissy fit. You can see just power washed all the mud right in the street. Luckily, the catch basin is way down the street, so I made him clean it all up. This is one that just baffles me. This is a farmer that had a tank full of pesticide, and he needed to switch to a different pesticide. So he drove through a rural end of town that goes out of town and emptied his tanks on our street. Just reeked like pesticide. And he thought that was funny. And you can see he just drove down and sprayed the street. So we had to get hazmat, clean that up, and have the ER unit. These are those roll-off dumpsters. You cannot put regular residential refuse, anything that'll rot, into these dumpsters. Lumber, rocks, things that can get wet and not rot. But as you can see, they put all kinds of stuff, and hydraulic fluid leaked all over and into my system. Not a good thing. These are the things that you look for, and then you call your staff. This here is a restaurant. And every so often they have to have their grease pits cleaned out. And they didn't put the proper cover back on that was a sealed screw-in type deal. They just laid the metal plate over it. Well, someone clogged the toilet into place. And now you can see I got my emergency stuff that I keep in my truck there, and this is all sewage coming out of their parking lot. We went in to verify it, and you can see the toilet paper and other stuff there that came up through it to verify, because he's like, oh, it ain't from us. We flushed his toilet, and that's what it was. So if he would have had the proper cap in there to back up through his toilet, but at least he would have been able to clean it up and not have it go down the storm drain. This is bad construction practice. The guy poured this wall, put a bunch of loose sand here, and ran. You can see it eroded down and around the corner. There's actually an inlet protector right there, but obviously it's not doing any good, and it's just bypassing and going down. This was one that made my city manager extremely angry. We spent thousands of dollars having this all chip sealed and painted nice. This is an alley behind our bars. They get gross. He had it nice and cleaned up. About a week later, someone comes down and stains all this new pavement with oil. It wouldn't. We put the sweepers, tried washing it, it wouldn't come off. We thought he basically came in my office. You figure out who did that, and you make him fix it. It was that simple. And so we have traffic cams. I love them. They're my favorite tool in this part of town. So I went through a bunch of footage. I thought it was maybe garbage trucks that had a hydraulic line bust because they come through there once a week. It wasn't them. And you can see this weird trail and it goes all the way down. It was just baffling, but I found the footage. It was this. It was a bouncer from a bar with all his grease from his fryers and popcorn oil or whatever in there. And it was busted, and so it leaked on the wheels, and he just tracked it down there. That bouncer cost the owner of that bar like $6,000 to have that repaid down there. When you go to a creek and you see stuff that glows like this in an oily sheen, it's not a good deal. It's like, what the heck is that? So then you got to follow it back and what it turned out. And this is why I suggest that your fire department get the county wide duty officer reports sent to them, because the CHSs and the ADMs and the railroad especially, they will call and they will say, hey, we had a spill, but they won't tell the city, even though it affects them. So I get this call from residents that were out walking in a nice park that this weird glowing stuff was in there. And what they did is they cleaned out their big soybean oil tanks, and this is where they were supposed to hook it to go into the sanitary, but they hooked it here that goes into the storm and put it out in the creek. Grass clippings, big problem, I showed you that. Washing a parking lot without, they can wash parking lots, but they gotta sweep it first. Get all the cigarette butts, get it clean as you can, then wash it, because then you've done your due diligence. Public Works saved us on this one. They were down in a pipe, it was August, there'd been no rain for like 2 weeks. Why is this pipe running full bore with chocolate milk in it? Because the college contractor had a bunch of water in their hole from 2 weeks ago, and they decided to get clever, put this pump in and kind of hide it so no one would see it, run it behind some piles, and then put it into a catch basin in the back. And so no one saw it, well then it comes out into that pipe and we found it. This was a plumber, that's a stockpile of dirt. Why would you put your discharge hose on top of a stockpile of dirt? Because all it's going to do is wash over, go down the hill. Just bad decisions. Right here, there's my little fish. Absolutely no dumping, leads to the river, a little loon. What does this guy do? Sticks it right in there. Not going to tell you the name of that power company right there, but they basically were sucking out a manhole and pumping it out into our storm drain. Didn't even try to hide it. He's right on one of our busiest streets, got the blue hose. If you see that, you need to call somebody. There's nothing good that's coming from that. And if they're doing that, they better have permission from the city to do it, because it violates your MS4. People that do this, they're just drawing attention to themselves. Tracking all over, no inlet protection, it's just mud going down. County project, mud just going down. Here's the ready-mix guy I was telling you about. This guy came from 30 miles away from Mankato. He left his water on. Turned the concrete into just pancake batter. It was useless, couldn't use it. He tried pumping it, it wouldn't move. So what does he do? He goes down to a catch basin. This is the owner of the property who called me. It's a woman who's about this tall, and she is just ripping this guy, screaming at him. She's got me on the phone while she's yelling at him out the window and taking a picture of him, and he's just playing on his phone, ignoring her. But he is emptying 10 yards of concrete into a creek right there. Doesn't think it's a problem. This right here is a big box store. The Wonder Bread guy calls me and says, hey, they're dumping something. This doesn't look right. I saw your video, got your number. You might want to look at this. These guys are diamond grinding. It's a new thing. They don't use wax, they polish. Well, it makes a very high pH hazardous waste. But there's a process where you put a neutralizer in it, and then you can wash it down the sanitary sewer system, and it's okay, it's legal if you do it that way. But that's time consuming, and it makes the sink look ugly. And then the manager of the store gets mad because the sink's dirty. And so they take these things, they dump it into these big barrels that are supposed to be neutralized and then dumped into the sanitary, and they just dump it out into, what you saw in the other picture, out into the parking lot off the dock and into the storm drain. The Minnesota River was like right over here. Went straight to the Minnesota River. It was 13 pH, which if you know your chemistry is very high. It's on one side, you either have acid or alkali on each side of the spectrum. This stuff was so hot that it ended up with an MPCA violation because it's hazardous waste. And just giving you a small version of what I was talking about, the floatable islands. Why do we do this? Why is this the right thing to do, within our means? This is just one of my stormwater ponds up by the college. You got Powerade, you got insulation, cigarettes, pop cans, pop bottles. This is all what's coming down out of our parking lots and into our storm drain system. Everywhere in this town, it's all washing down the storm drain and it's ending up somewhere. And that's just one little glimpse. Can you imagine in a big city how much is actually going on? And this is what we're trying to stop. The ones that we can control. This is what a construction site will do to a beautiful body of water. You got a little creek here, you got some development going up, they're not taking care of business up from the air. They're sending all this plume of sediment out into a beautiful lake. You guys have seriously good quality lakes up here. Our rivers and lakes down by us are already damaged. We're just trying to get them good. You guys have, this is where I come to vacation because I feel safe in your water up here. And if we let people like this do this, it's gonna wreck it. And here is how I close. You just can't understand how people come up with ideas. That is an inlet protector. That was clogged. And I told the contractor he needed to get that out of there. Well, it's full of sediment because he hasn't been taking care of it. He doesn't have a skid loader so he can lift it out of there. So for some reason he thinks it's a good idea to dump gas in it and light it on fire and burn it out of there. I can't make this stuff up. What part of that does a guy get up in the morning and go, this is a good idea? Any questions? This is why you think this stuff isn't going on, it's going on. I mean, now that you've seen these examples, you're going to be out driving around. I know you're going to look to the left and see the cigarette butts because everybody sends me an email and says that they saw them there because they're there. But now you know what to look for when you're driving around. That's all we're asking. Just if you see it, see something, say something. You don't have to do anything extra. Just call and let them know. And that's how you find all this stuff. It's not me out driving around looking for it. Any questions? All right. Thank you for your time. Appreciate it.